Hey guys, what's up? This is Tony from alphapursuits.com. In this video, we are going to talk about Sharpe ratio. And the reason that I got interested in this topic is because right now I'm trying out different options trading strategies. And I want to see which trading strategy performs better. So Sharpe ratio is actually one of the ways to measure that by looking at the risk factor of this strategy. And obviously, if you dig a little bit deeper about Sharpe ratio, you can use that for portfolio, you can use that for strategies, and then you can really dig a lot deeper than what I'm going to talk about here. But what I want to do here is rather give a simple concept, and so that we can appreciate why Sharpe ratio is a good and powerful measurement for what we're trying to do when comparing different portfolio or different strategies. So let's get started. Now, to simplify the concept, I want to talk about growing plants. So imagine you are growing plants and you are developing two different fertilizers. And let's say you develop them into a peel form. So what you do is you put the peel next to the plant, and then you just water it, and then the plant will start grow. So let's say you tested out these two fertilizers on 3 different plants each. So for peel number 1, fertilizer number 1, you tested it on 3 different plants. They are all the same plants. Let's just simplify the whole thing here. And after 2 weeks, let's say, you went back to the plant and measure it. And so when you measure it, the first plant grew 19 centimeters higher than before the test started. And then the second one grew 4 centimeters. The third one grew 7 centimeters. So, after you measure that, and then you take the average growth of these plants, and I wrote down average return. It's because to calculate Sharpe ratio, one of the numbers that we need is average return. And in this case, it's basically how much the plant grew. So it's like a return essentially here. So the average for that is 10 centimeter. You basically 19 plus 4 plus 7, and then you add them up, divided by 3, which give you 10. Then you also need to calculate the standard deviation, so which turned out to be 7.94. And standard deviation is basically how much difference each result is compared to the average. So as you can see, the average is 10. For the first one, it's 9, so it's 9 larger than 10. The second one is 4, which is 6 smaller than 10, and third one is 7, which is 3 smaller than 10. So this standard deviation measurement basically measures, you have all these samples, and what's the difference between each sample and the average. And obviously, larger the movement, larger the standard deviation, because if you compare peel number 2 here, which is a different fertilizer you're developing, and you again did the same with 3 plants, and the first plant grew 12, the second plant grew 8, third one grew 10 centimeter, and when you averaged up, it's 10. But when you calculate the standard deviation, it's only 2, because 12 is only 2 bigger than 10, 8 is 2 smaller than 10, and the last one is just exactly the same as 10. Now, once we have these 2 numbers, average return and standard deviation, we can calculate the Sharpe ratio. And the equation, which if you like, you can read this up. I got this from tdameritrade.com. It's basically saying, first you need to get the P&L number, profit and loss number, of the trades, and then you get the average of that. Then you calculate the standard deviation, And then to get the Sharpe ratio, divide the average by standard deviation. So coming back to the example that we are doing here, which basically average return 10 divided by 7.94, which will give 1.26. This is the Sharpe ratio for PO number 1. And then for PO number 2, we do the same, 10 divided by 2, which gives you 5. And Sharpe ratio, larger the Sharpe ratio is better, actually. And I actually also found a nice article here from seekingalpha.com, and it talks about, what is a good Sharpe ratio. So Sharpe ratio, if it's anything lower than 0.25, it's very bad. And according to this article, 0.5, which is the typical Sharpe ratio of S&P 500 over a 10-year period. So, if you get a number around 0.5, you can sort of assume that you are doing pretty okay, so to speak. You are getting the market return, so to speak. So anything better than 0.5, you are doing better than the market. And again, coming back to here, so what we are measuring here is the volatility of strategy or portfolio. Okay, so what we want to do, you can just substitute this fertilizer with, let's say option trading strategy number 1, option trading strategy number 2. And you obviously substitute the growth with P&L, and you can see, okay, with strategy number 1, the Sharpe ratio is 1.26. It's much lower than the second one, which is 5. The reason being, it's much more volatile because, one trade you get 19, and then all of a sudden you only get 4, and then you get 7. So there's a wide jump up and down with each trade compared to, option trading number 2, where it's more steady, 12, 8, 10. So as far as, looking at how volatile the strategy number 1 is compared to number 2, obviously number 2 is much better. Now let's change the average return a little bit and also the standard deviation. So let's say if average return is only 5 and standard deviation is only 1. And so the Sharpe ratio actually remains the same, but the average return now for options trading strategy number 2 is lower than number 1, which is better because from just looking at the average return, number 2 is now 5, number 1 is 10. But looking at the Sharpe ratio though, number 1 is 1.26 and number 2 is still 5, even though the average return is lower. And so what Sharpe ratio does is it measures the return based on the risk that we are taking. So for strategy number 2, the amount of return that we are getting based on the risk that we are taking is much better compared to number 1, which obviously we are taking more risk, but the return for the risks that we are taking isn't actually that good compared to number 2. That's what the Sharpe ratio is telling us. So if you want to maximize the risk taking, so to speak, and squeeze out as much return per risk like you are taking, strategy number 2 is better because even though the return is lower, 5, standard deviation is now 1, the return per risk taken is better for number 2, even though the return is lower. Now coming back to the growing plants analogy, obviously you will want to use a fertilizer that gives you a more equal growth rather than something that ended up making the plant grow. One grows very, very tall and the other doesn't grow at all. So from that perspective, with a fertilizer that has a higher Sharpe ratio will give you a better plants, so to speak. Hopefully this makes sense and it's helpful. And if you like the video, please give it a thumb up and share with your friends. And please subscribe to the channel if you want to get an update when I publish a new video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.